if somebody is trying to build a business, they will try to rush you into your position because you said that you've been going to that school for a couple of years, and because you've been going to that school for a couple of years, and they said that you are qualified to be this and that, but they don't see something is important. Are you qualified to do the job? I'm not going to rest upon that because many people may not understand when I'm saying that. Many of you may prejudge what I'm saying without listening to the following explanation, because the qualification of God's calling, what is it? Many people think that is to be ordained by your leader or by a leader. But not only you're called by God, or the ordination by a leader is another part, because God had placed a leader over you so that you may have experience in the ministry, because we cannot just feel God's presence and decide we're going to take a decision of leading His people. Are you experienced to lead God's people? Unless God trains you. You talk about Moses. Moses was under the leadership of Pharaoh. Moses knows how to lead. Yet God had bring Moses' leadership into a transition from being against the slave to before the slave. At the time Moses realized that his own mother and father was Hebrews. But we have understand as well that in the Church of Jesus Christ, you have to be under a leader before you can even be in a position, literally in a position of leadership, leading God's people as a senior pastor of a church. Had you had not been successful of following, it is really hard for you, not even saying impossible, for you to be successful in leading. But the second point, I'm not going to stay on that, but the second point is to be spiritually mature. You have to have the maturity in the spiritual. You have to be mature in order to lead God's people, because God is a God who provides. Amen. God provides for whoever He called. If God called you, God will provide for you. There is a time God called you, and there is also a time that He gave you a green light. I understand Samuel heard the voice of God as a little boy when Eli didn't hear the voice of God as a mature man of God. But Eli started to get off track. So God had to talk to Samuel in order for the message to pass to Eli. But though the calling was in Samuel's life, God didn't give Samuel the green light until he was mature of the Spirit to be called and acknowledged as a known prophet throughout the city and throughout the country. God knew Jeremiah before he was born, but there was a time God called Jeremiah and gave him a green light and say, you have to go. Though God gave Jeremiah the green light, you have to go, and he thought he was too young, but God had given him the provision of the Spirit, and which is the maturity, and Jeremiah started to do great things. And it's the same way that I'm talking about. You have to be spiritually mature to do that, to go to that way with the Lord, not only before you have to step in any position, you have to spiritually mature, because everybody wants to step in a position because I feel it, I can do it. I don't think it's a good strategy. If you feel it, it doesn't mean you have to do it. But you have to be able to see something in the spirit. If you're walking in the spirit, this is what it says in the book of John. God says he's a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. But if you are walking in the spirit that you cannot see God, it means that you're not really walking in the spirit. Because if God is a spirit, he had given you a spiritual maturity. Then when God moves, you're supposed to see. And when God gives you a green light, you're supposed to see. But don't take any chances getting into a position if God don't give you the green light. When God gives you the green light, it gives you the position. You may have the calling since you're a little boy, but God is not calling you to be in a position when you were a little boy. You have to understand God has a time for everything. Even when Jesus Christ, even at the age of a very young boy, Jesus, from, everybody wants to know that Jesus grew up in Bethlehem, but Jesus was a Nazarene. He was born in Israel, in the manger. If you read the story, even according to the book of Luke chapter 2, he tells you all of the story. But at the same time, we have to realize that Jesus grew up to 10 years old in Africa. People don't want to say that, but Jesus grew in Africa when God sent Jesus Christ and Mary and Joseph to flee to Africa, and until King Herod died, and then they come back to Jerusalem. But I'm opening that evidence to let you know that Jesus, not only he knows he was born in Bethlehem, but Jesus grew up in Africa up to the age of 10 years old, and Jesus, they come back to Israel after the death of King Herod. When he comes back, at a very young age, Jesus Christ started to teach to these leaders in the synagogue. And then not only he was teaching them in the synagogue, they found that was amazing, and they were just couldn't do nothing but gaze in the presence of a little child. But though Jesus was in that position to teach these leaders in the synagogue, and in the time, the process, Jesus was still growing up, and Jesus was doing miracles. And when everybody wants to tell Jesus, you got to do this, you got to do that, what did Jesus say? My time has not yet come. When he said his time has not yet come, he knows he is the Son of God. He knows he is, all of these, the Messiah. But also, he has an appointed time in a specific mission that will be an engagement, because it is a spiritual fight that's going to be done among the kingdoms. The third point, and the other point I have to talk about in the second point is to learn to see God's signal, which I already talked about. Before you decide any position that should be taken, do you understand what I'm saying? Before you decide any position, then you have to learn how to see God's signal. And the third point is talking about the engagement in every single opportunity. As you are called of God, you know God's signal, you walk in the Spirit, you see all of these things, but at the same time, we have to understand very much, to understand very much for us to be engaged. This is after you're called, after you're ordained as a pastor, as a minister, as a teacher, as a deacon, as an evangelist, as a prophet, as a teacher, as all these things. Now you have to go through the process of an engagement. You have to go through the process to engage. Not only you being ordained, but you're being ordained by all these people that you have to understand. Now you are entering a field where the fight is worst. So you have to engage in a fight, because the enemy is not going to let you do all what you're doing, come getting people out of the world, bringing people into the church without attacking you severely. But the enemy is not playing with you, and this consequently that the enemy is trying to kill, distill